Is called the stone floor, and obviously because in this one I've got two sets of millstones, which does the milling of the grain that comes through. So the grain comes down. If I had the grain chute up there into the top hopper, then I check it as it comes through. That hopper fills up, then it flows down into what's known as the slipper or the shoe. That actually then allows the grain to be agitated because it runs off of what's called a damsel. I've got a four-pronged or four squared sided damsel which would rotate it when obviously that nut assembly. So I've got three nuts put in the picture there. So each one of these up vertical gear drive with a wooden teeth on it are called nuts. They drive off what is the main spur or the great spur wheel. So that obviously rotates when the mill rotates, and then I drive. I've got to engage this obviously when everything's stationary, and to start the milling process. So the grain goes through to the top hopper via the shoe. I regulate the grain gate to set the flow, because obviously when the mill's stopped you don't want grain to continue to flow into the either stone because it'll clog it, and then it'll be very, very hard to start when you do get wind. So this is called a horse because obviously it's got four legs and it carries something. This little device here, this wooden leaf spring, is called a rabbit. It hops back and forth, and you've got the tub or the ton, which encases the flour. So the grain then feeds into what's known as the eye of the stone. Then I set the aperture or the gap between the two millstones, and then also regulate the flow. So it's the manipulation of those two areas that then eventually, going on the speed of the mill, then that's obviously transmits a load, and once I'm happy with the fineness of the grind, well, she's set. So the grain then feeds in between the two millstones. This is known as an upper runner. I've got a bed stone below it that's stationary. You've got a series of furrows. Them furrows are in what's called harps, and the milling actually happens on what's called the lands, which is the flat upper part of what is the millstone surface. So the furrows actually assist with feeding the grain in. That happens, they're all set to specific angles when the stones are dressed, and the grain breaks down as it goes between the two and comes to the outer part of the millstone, which is called the skirt. Obviously the ground flour then is deposited and is wiped around with wipers that are situated on the 2 points of the runner stone, and falls to the drop point, which is approximately here. You can see the drop point on that one. And that's the whole grain flour is then expelled out of the system. So your milling processes happen. So,
and into bags down below.
Yes, and so what's called the bagging floor below us. So this is my auxiliary drive. So if I want to drive a unit outside of actually the milling, which I do, so I run a grain roller on the grain floor, you engage that particular unit. So the wooden teeth were for basically three reasons. Obviously they're very, very easy to place when they wear. So generally a miller will have a second or third set of those teeth on hand, so when they wore, he could easily replace them very quickly. So it didn't require any welding or build-up, which was not available in days anyway. Also, it acted as a shear point, so the miller then had the opportunity that if something did jam, he didn't want to damage any of this equipment, so he was more than happy to see those wooden teeth broken. Generally, a miller would make them of either pear or apple tree, because it's extremely hard and also very brittle. So it allowed that shear point. And then there was the obviously the anti-sparking, so little bit of a myth, this flour dust combustion, because in the process of milling you never have the concentration of flour dust floating around to the degree that allows it to combust. And that was evident years ago with a lot of millers milling at night. They would have candles situated throughout the mill everywhere. And, there was very, very few. Generally it was surface combustion of flour dust that occurred. So say a bearing or bush was overheating and got to around 560 degrees, it could then further flash. You can get flashes between the two millstones if they do touch. So the art of milling is not to have them touching. Actually, you've got to somewhat semi-float the runner stone. So that's getting your grain feed right from the start. So you're actually somewhat semi-suspending that runner stone between the grain that you feed in. and then to manipulate the little thumb screw which operates the grain gate.
Yeah.
And obviously the tendering hook, which allows me to lift or lower the runner stone, is by which way you set the grind. So you get inconsistencies in grain moisture, which will momentarily cause the runner stone to slap. So the miller has to be very vigilant of that. So hence the old saying, keep your nose to the grindstone, as all millers do, because you are checking constantly for any burning in the flour, because flour taints very quickly. And you do not want flour already having a burnt smell before it even gets to a baker.
Yeah.